Welcome back to Buck's Garage, where this week we are back to the old German junk, but I have something new for you. If you saw my last video, I had at least a few of you thinking that I had traded in my BMW 530i on a Lincoln Town Car with an American V8. And that didn't really turn out to be the case. But I have actually moved on from the 530i, and I've changed manufacturers in the process, and this is what I've come up with. In a previous video on the 530i, I told you that what I really wanted when I bought that car was a V8 with a little more power than the inline 6 can provide. Unfortunately, BMW hasn't come up with a V8 that was worth anything in the last 2 decades. They've all got rod bearing issues, timing chain issues, valve seal issues. The list just goes on, and I really didn't want to have all those headaches. So I started looking at other manufacturers. I considered a Lexus ISF, didn't really have the driving feel that I wanted, so a natural progression was to move on to Mercedes. This is a 2012 Mercedes E550. The cool thing about the 2012 model year is it was the first year that it came with the M278 engine. Prior to this car came with a 5.5 liter V8 that put out about 380 horsepower. This new engine is a slightly smaller 4.7 liter V8, and the reason for that is of course fuel efficiency. However, Mercedes has added 2 turbos to the package to actually increase the horsepower over the previous engine. We'll get into some more detail on the engine later, but for now, let's just say this is exactly the sort of engine I was looking for in my next sport luxury sedan. Now, there's a lot of things that I really like about this car, but there are 3 main things that I want to go over that kind of stand out over all the rest. So let's get into it, and we will start with that M278 engine. So what do you get when Mercedes sacrifices engine size for fuel efficiency? Well, a lot better fuel mileage for one. I drive this car every day to work about 12 miles each way on country roads with stop signs every mile. And I get about 24 miles to the gallon on average in this car, which is pretty impressive for a V8 engine. Where this car really shines is on the highway. I've taken this car on a few different road trips, and I routinely get 28 to 30 miles per gallon driving this on the highway. And I don't exactly drive it nice. I've driven it on the Mexico highway a couple of times, and let's just say about 90-95 miles an hour average, it's still getting 30 miles per gallon. But enough about fuel efficiency, because who really cares? I don't. I'm sure you don't either. What we really care about is the power. This BiTurbo V8 came from the factory rated at 410 horsepower. A lot of people will argue that that is slightly underrated, and I tend to agree after driving the car. But I think there's a pretty good reason for that. Now I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but I think that, and this is all just my opinion, but I think that Mercedes significantly detuned this engine from its full potential from the factory. The reason for that is their flagship model of this car, the E63 AMG. That car carries a much heftier price tag than this cheaper E550. It also has more power. It has a very similar BiTurbo V8 that is rated for 520 horsepower, whereas this one only has the 410. Of course, they can't have this cheaper E550 competing with the flagship E63, and that's why I believe this is rated clear down at 410. Now, usually when you want to get more power out of an engine, you got to do modifications, buy new parts. You know, depending on the engine, there's lots of things you can do. This engine is pretty interesting in that you can get a lot more out of it with just an ECU tune. For about $1,500 you can buy a tune for this car that will take it from the current 410 horsepower clear up to 550 horsepower with no bolt-on parts, nothing else, no fuel changes, nothing crazy. Just an ECU tune will get you 30 horsepower more than the E63 AMG out of this engine. And that's why I really like this engine. I think this car really is the sweet spot because you don't have to pay the E63 price, and for another $1,500 you can have more power than the E63 has. Now that of course begs the question, have I tuned my car? And the answer is no, maybe not yet, not quite sure yet. This car is my commuter car, so I drive it to work, back and forth to work every day. We take it on road trips. I've put a lot of miles on it in the 1 year I've owned it. To be honest, it really is hard to find places to use the current 410 horsepower. I mean, on surface roads, public roads, it really is hard to get into the power band on this car. So what am I going to do with another 140 horsepower? I'm not totally sure. Every once in a while you do get it on the highway and you get to really get into this car, and it's a lot of fun. But I just don't know that I need another 140 horsepower. But if you're watching an automotive YouTube channel, you probably don't really care about what you need, and I don't really either, because what we really care about is what we want out of a car. And so stay tuned on this car because it's probably going to get tuned at some point. Moving on from the engine, let's talk about the second thing that I really love about this car. The other unique thing about the 2012, other than the first year for the M278 engine, is it also had one available feature that was pretty rare but was available on the 2012, and that was the Mercedes Airmatic suspension. Now you go to any Mercedes forum, Mercedes Facebook group, other YouTube channels, and they're all going to tell you to run and hide from Mercedes Airmatic suspension. They'll tell you that your wallet will hate you, your wife is probably going to leave you, and your life is going to be ruined, so just don't even go there. But personally, I really kind of like it, so far. So there are a few reasons I'm a really big fan of Mercedes Airmatic suspension. One is just the ride quality. This thing soaks up bumps better than any other car I've ever driven and still maintains a really nice planted feel as well. The other thing is adjustability. With just a simple $150 suspension link part, you can adjust the ride height on this car wherever you want it, which really comes in handy when you're looking at aftermarket wheels, the kind of stance you want, fitment, all of that sort of stuff. It really is very adjustable. But the biggest thing that I really love about Mercedes Airmatic suspension is the versatility. This car really is 3 cars in one, just based on that Airmatic suspension. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So currently the car is in sport mode, and this is car number 1. This is your German luxury sports sedan. This thing handles nice, still has a comfortable ride, not necessarily a sports car, you're not going to go hustling it through the tightest of corners, but it just gives a very nice, really somewhat sporty planted feel. The cool thing about this is in sport mode, the faster you go, the tighter and stiffer the suspension gets. It'll actually hunker down the ride height the faster you go and just be a lot more solid at high speed. Back to that Mexican freeway I was talking about before, I've had this car up to about 140 miles an hour and it was rock solid at that speed. But maybe you don't want a sports car for the day. Maybe you want something a little bit more comfortable. So you can move this car into comfort mode. Comfort mode is great. It raises the suspension up, as seen here, an inch or two, and gets a lot more comfortable. It doesn't quite handle as well in the corners, but it just floats and soaks up bumps so much better. So maybe you're on a long road trip going down the highway and you want to be comfortable. Maybe you're going to the airport to pick up your grandma and she can't get into a low car and she wants a more comfortable ride. All you got to do is push a button. You now have a comfort luxury sedan. Now the third mode is what I like to call off-road mode. This is where your German luxury sports sedan transforms into the SUV or crossover that everybody's driving these days thinking they need it when they're really only going to use it once or twice per year. Essentially what this does is it gives you an extra 1 to 2 inches of ground clearance over the even higher comfort mode, and couple that with the Mercedes 4Matic all-wheel drive system and the traction control in this car, and this car can do Subaru things in any deep snow or muddy off-road situation that you can throw at it. It really is pretty impressive. I actually have a 4-wheel drive pickup with 35-inch tires on it, and I end up driving this into situations it probably really shouldn't go into, but it's never let me down so far. So yes, the Mercedes Airmatic suspension system can be a little scary. There's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, from air compressors, valve bodies, the airbags on all 4 corners. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And unfortunately, when it does go wrong, it's very expensive to fix. Even doing it yourself like I do, the parts can be a little bit expensive. I'll go over a little bit more of that in a future video because I have done some work to the Airmatic on this. But in my opinion, having the versatility of having 3 cars in one really makes the system worth it, and I'm a big fan of it. Now the third thing I really love about this car is all the little things that it just takes care of for you. So to show you that, let's go for a drive. Okay, now that we're in the car, let's just get started with a quick feature check. We've got blind spot monitoring, which is pretty nice. That's the first car I've had that's had that. Harman Kardon stereo. We've got memory seats, of course, with 3 different memory settings. Rain sensing wipers, automatic headlights. Really nice display with an analog clock for some unknown reason. Of course, you've got the navigation, you've got radio, Bluetooth for calls and streaming music. Pretty nice setup as far as the stereo. No CarPlay. I am going to work on that in the future, so stay tuned if you want to know how to do that. As far as the buttons, we've got heated and cooled seats for passenger and driver, automatic climate control, of course. Moving on, we've got Eco and Sport mode for the engine, and then this is where our Sport, Comfort, and Race suspension mode is. Really nice thing on this car, kind of a rare option, is the dynamic seat. So this seat actually has dynamic bolsters that will stiffen up as you go around a corner. And then it also has a massaging feature, and you can adjust the lumbar, of course. So really nice driver's seat. Doesn't have the massaging on the passenger seat, which my wife is not a big fan of, but I really like the driver's seat. It's got paddle shifters, which is nice. You may have noticed this is not the stock wheel that came in this car. I did upgrade the steering wheel on this. If you're interested in knowing how to do that, hit me up in the comments and I may do a video on that. It does have a sunroof that's a panoramic roof, so you get one in the back seat as well, which is kind of nice. And just a couple of quick quirks about the rear on this car, back seat. It's got this button up front that if somebody's left the headrests up in the back and they are blocking your vision and you don't want them there, hit that button and down they go. Kind of a nice little feature. And also has a sunshade in the back that you can put up and down with a button. Kind of cool. Just nice little features. But as I was saying, what I really like about this car is the stuff that it just does for you. So we'll get on the road and I'll show you some of that. So starting at the front of the car, one of the great things this car does for you is starts with the headlights. So like a lot of other cars, it will start to adjust the headlights as you turn the car, which is nice, but this car takes it another step further and actually has a separate bulb in each headlight housing that is just for turning. So if you're under a certain speed and you start to turn the wheel, that headlight bulb will illuminate just the corner for you and make sure it's nice and bright. Just a small thing, but it really is kind of a cool little feature, a nice little thought by Mercedes there. Staying with the front of the car, one of the best features on this car is it does have Distronic cruise control. And I love this feature. What that means is you can set the cruise, which I've done now. So I've set the cruise at 45. The van in front of me is only going 35, 30. So the car automatically slows down for me. I'm not doing any braking. I'm not doing any speed adjustment. Foot is off the gas and brake, and the car's just taking care of it for me. As he speeds up, I speed up as well. This is great on road trips. You can just set the cruise at what you want. If a truck pulls over in the left lane in front of you, it'll slow you right down. You can set the distance that you want to keep. I can increase the distance. Notice the van's getting away from me now. I'm not making any adjustments. I've just adjusted how far I want to be away from that truck. And it'll hold that distance for me and speed up as he does, and I can set that wherever I want to, 50, 55, 60, and I'm still maintaining pace with the car in front of me. Really great feature, and it's something I use all the time. I could never go back to not having it. Other things that the car does for you, like I said, the dynamic bolsters, those are great, they work great. I still haven't braked at all, and I'm not hitting the gas now, and the car is accelerating on its own up to the 60 miles an hour that I set on that cruise control. But anyway, enough about features. We're here for the performance of this car. So I have the car in eco mode. I'm going to let it shift itself. I'm not going to use the paddle shifters. We'll do a 0 to 60 run here. So ready? 3, 2, 1, and away. 40, 50, and 60. Quite a bit quicker than the old 530i. And that was in eco mode. It's a good bit faster in sport mode. Okay, here is 0 to 60 in sport mode, and no paddle shifting, just letting the trans do its thing. 3, 2, 1, go. 40, 50, and 60. And this thing scoots. As you can see, this thing has no issues getting from 0 to 60. Getting on the highway is a lot of fun on this thing. But where this car really shines is in that 50 to 120 mile an hour range. If you're trying to pass somebody on a 2-lane highway, or even just try to get around somebody on the freeway, it really moves in those speed ranges. So I'm doing 45 now. I put my foot down, a couple of shifts, and away we go. And pretty soon you're doing 90. So just a really impressive car. This is on the heavier winter tire setup too. It gets a little bit quicker on the summer setup. So I think you can kind of see why I upgraded from the BMW 530i. This thing is just a lot more comfortable. It's a lot more versatile with that Mercedes Airmatic suspension. It's got the 4Matic, so it's better in the winter and all the off-road stuff I do with it. And most importantly, it's got that V8 power I was looking for originally. Do I need to tune it and get another 140 horsepower out of it? I'm not sure. Maybe. I've had the car for about a year and I'm not bored with it yet. May get that way in the future, so it's nice to know that with just a $1,500 tune I can get E63 AMG performance out of this car. But for now, I'm just really happy with how nice of a daily driver this car is, how well it performs on road trips, and how it's just a great all-around, really versatile car that really didn't cost me a lot of money. I've got the original window sticker on this car. This car sold for $88,000 when it was new in 2012, which is a lot of money to somebody like me. I came along 8 years later at 95,000 miles for this car, and I picked it up for $13,000. Yep, it had dropped $75,000 in value in just 8 years. And you know what? I'm okay with that because I really appreciate depreciation. So there's the review on the E550. There'll be more to come on this. I'll give you a little more on some of the stuff I've done to it since I've had it. And there will be some stuff I do to it in the future. So stay tuned to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. It's very dirty, even though I just washed it, because it is impossible to make a brown car clean. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is a brown car. Looks black in some light, looks dirty in all lights, but it is dark brown.